Welcome to our deep dive into postmodern portfolio theory, also known as PMPT. In today's video, we'll cover the fundamentals of PMPT, compare it with modern portfolio theory, MPT, and analyze its applications with real-world examples. By the end of this session, you'll have a thorough understanding of PMPT and how to use it to maximize returns while managing risk. To start, let's briefly recap modern portfolio theory. MPT, developed by Harry Markowitz in 1952, proposes that investors can construct portfolios to maximize expected returns based on a given level of market risk, emphasizing diversification. Now, let's dive into postmodern portfolio theory. PMPT builds on MPT but focuses more on the downside risk. Instead of looking at standard deviation as a measure of risk, PMPT uses a concept called downside deviation, or semi-deviation. The return measurement in PMPT can be better exemplified by focusing on the Sortino ratio as opposed to the Sharpe ratio used in MPT. The Sortino ratio measures excess return per unit of downside risk. Let's consider a practical example. Assume portfolio A has an annualized return of 10% and portfolio B has 8%. The risk-free rate is 2%. The downside deviation of portfolio A is 12%, while it's only 5% for portfolio B. Let's calculate the Sortino ratio for both. From our calculations, portfolio B has a higher Sortino ratio. This indicates that portfolio B provides a better return per unit of downside risk compared to portfolio A, making it a preferable choice according to PMPT. Another important aspect of PMPT is the concept of omega ratio, which helps investors consider both the upside and downside potential of a portfolio. The omega ratio gives a complete view of the performance potential by comparing the probability-weighted gains to losses. To fully grasp the omega ratio, let's calculate it for a hypothetical portfolio with the following expected return distribution. Given this distribution, let's assume our threshold return is 5%. The probability-weighted gains are the range above 5%, and losses are below. With an omega ratio of 1.4, the portfolio has more expected gains above the 5% threshold compared to losses. This makes it an attractive option under the PMPT framework. PMPT also accommodates the concept of value at risk, VAR, and conditional value at risk, CVAR, offering enhanced measures for understanding potential losses in extreme market conditions. CVAR, also known as expected shortfall, goes beyond VAR by assessing the average losses during the worst-case scenarios beyond the VAR threshold. Here is a graph showing the VAR and CVAR for a given portfolio. The VAR indicates a maximum expected loss of 8% at the 95% confidence level, while the CVAR reflects an expected loss of 12% in extreme cases. Critics of PMPT argue that the approach can become overly complex and may rely on subjective thresholds and assumptions. Despite these criticisms, PMPT's emphasis on downside risk and tailored return metrics offers nuanced insights that can be invaluable for sophisticated investors. Before we conclude, let's answer some common questions related to PMPT. How does PMPT handle highly volatile assets? Unlike MPT, PMPT specifically addresses extreme negative outcomes and can provide a more realistic risk assessment for these assets using downside deviation and CVAR. What type of investor benefits most from PMPT? Generally, risk-averse investors, institutional investors, and those handling large, diversified portfolios can benefit from PMPT to better manage and assess downside risks. How is PMPT implemented in practice? Many financial software tools now incorporate PMPT metrics and optimization techniques, allowing investors to easily integrate these strategies into their portfolios. In summary, postmodern portfolio theory extends the foundational concepts of modern portfolio theory by giving more weight to downside risks, using evolved metrics like the Sortino ratio and omega ratio, and offering advanced risk measurements such as CVAR. Thank you for joining us in this deep dive into postmodern portfolio theory. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more finance tutorials. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, leave them in the comments below. See you next time.